We're looking at a trial site here in New South Wales. It's started this year with funding from the Western Local Land Services. What we're looking at is longer term rotations, impact on soil health, things like soil carbon and soil nitrogen, but also productivity and profitability over that period. So this year the trial has started, and we're starting here in phase 1 of the trial, which is looking at the different break crop options. Each of those different break crop options have been chosen for their impact on the amount of nitrogen that they return to the farming system through things like fixation. So in this plot I'm standing in here, this is vetch, which we actually cut for hay. So while we've been able to fix nitrogen, some of that, or a larger portion of that nitrogen has then been removed and taken off the paddock as a hay product and obviously sold. In contrast to that, we've got a regenerating medic pasture. So this medic pasture was sown this year. It's also going to fix nitrogen, but as a more grey system, or a system that remains in the paddock, we're expecting a large portion of that nitrogen to remain in the paddock. The other contrast we've got here is a fallow. Obviously a chemical fallow is kept weed free throughout the year, but there's nothing growing in there, so we're not actually inputting nitrogen, but we are saving water that may actually be of benefit, and saving nitrogen that's mineralised from the soil, and that may be a benefit to the future crops that are grown on that plot in future years. The other contrast we've got in the trial is we've got a oat and hay. So a rotation phase as a cereal doesn't actually produce any nitrogen, but it also removes nitrogen from the soil, and that nitrogen is exported out the paddock in the hay product. We've also got our pulses. So over there we've got lentils, which is obviously again fixing nitrogen into the paddock, but again a large proportion of that nitrogen is being removed in the grain product at the end of the day. And our last comparison we've got in the trial is our brown manure vetch. So with that, this is our maximum nitrogen input that we'd expect. We've grown the vetch crop, but we've basically sacrificed that vetch crop for soil health benefits in the future. So that nitrogen is fixed by the vetch. We've actually sprayed that vetch crop out without removing any product, and we're hoping that nitrogen will carry through and increase both the productivity and quality of future crops that are grown on this site. So that's phase 1 of this trial, and it's a 3-year trial, so we're actually going to follow this up with crops such as wheat and barley over subsequent years to see the impact of these rotations on nitrogen supply to those wheat and barley crops. So before we looked at the first phase of the rotation, which was looking at those different break crop choices that you might make, and looking at the impact of each one of those choices might have on nitrogen input, but also productivity and profitability of that break phase. I'm now looking at the wheat plots here, and those break phases are going to be followed up with a cereal rotation. So in the first year after the break phase, we're going to plant wheat, and the second year after the break phase, we're planting barley. So all up, there's a 3-year rotation where a third break crop, a third wheat and a third barley. So reasonably standard. What we're looking at in the wheat and the barley phase though is additional nitrogen inputs. So we're trying to see whether under different sequences the addition of fertiliser N as urea might have different impacts on the profitability and productivity of those following crops. So standing in the wheat here, this wheat here will have 4 different nitrogen treatments going forward, which will be 10 units of nitrogen, 30 units of nitrogen, 50 or 70 units. So we're looking at that in terms of the combination of both the nitrogen supply from the break crops and also the level of risk that we take and the level of inputs that we make into that cereal phase, and we're looking to see which combinations of those can maximise things like profitability and productivity across a rotation, and also investigate what's the overall impact of that on soil health, but also risk to the farmer in managing those rotations. So that's a bit of a wrap up of what we're doing here with this Western Local Land Services funded trial here in southern New South Wales. Really excited to see what happens with this work over the next 3 years and hopefully beyond. And stay tuned to MSF for results from this trial and also plenty of others that we have going right across the Mallee Sustainable Farming region.